All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the City of Burlington's Board of Finance on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 at 5:06 p.m. Our first item on our agenda is our agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Any discussion on the motion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to our public forum. It is the practice of the Board of Finance that we go first to folks in the room if they would like to address the Board of Finance for forum, and then we go online. I think I know everyone in the room and they're all city employees. So unless you would like to comment because you've been here and you just want to say something, I think you're here for agenda item. Okay, going online. Is there anyone online? And of course, our former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Good evening, Sharon. How are you? Welcome.
Good evening. So I'm okay. I wanted to comment on the audit that's on your agenda. And you know, every counselor brings, I think, brings unique value. And Karen Paul really put the spotlight on the importance of an audit and the importance of the management letter and the importance of the council to take this seriously. Before Karen was on the council, the audit was done by the administration. I think the council just rubber stamped it and never really dug into it. Why am I saying this? Because I'm less than perfect and I don't recall a discussion at the city council level about this. And I'm not suggesting anything be done now at this date, but I'm hoping that that there was time that looked at and congratulations, administration, for a very good audit report. But I'm hoping that there was time to look at what we could do differently and better. It's addressed very briefly in this summary statement tonight in the agenda, but I really learned a lot and really learned what we needed to focus on internally to make processes better. And I know Catherine has done an excellent job with that. And Mayor, I'm sure you've got your finger on the pulse also. But I just wanted to highlight that and hope that the council understands the importance and value of this, because without our city doing its job and functioning appropriately, things could fall short and we could be surprised, and those surprises most of the time are unpleasant. So thank you very much, and hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there anyone else online who would like to address Board of Finance? Not seeing any. All right, so I'm going to close the public forum and move on to our next item. Item number 3, our consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Thank you. Any further discussion on the consent agenda before we vote? I will just note for those watching at home, if you'd like to hear more about the fence installation project at 1 North Avenue, we will be discussing that and giving an update at the council upstairs in less than an hour or so if you want to hear some more details on that. But other than that, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to our first deliberative agenda item. Item 4.1, which is a budget amendment for 130 Bank Street, sales tax reallocation funds, a 2024 award for the BTC Public Improvements Project with CETO and DPW. I'm having coffee now, so this is why I'm short circuiting and ready for tonight upstairs. So anyway, welcome Chapin and Brian.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. For the record, Brian Pine, Director of the Community and Economic Development Office, and
Chapin Spencer, Director of Public Works.
And we have the good fortune of securing additional funding from the state of Vermont's sales tax reallocation program. As part of our designated downtown, you're eligible to seek those funds repeatedly for large projects when there's sufficient sales tax being incurred, the cost of the materials to build the project. And those funds are to come to the municipality for the municipal project, which is a qualified project, state deemed as eligible for these funds, and therefore the work that is taking place on the public right of way is, it's just that, so. What it really means is we have a little less borrowing to do using TIF, because every time we raise money elsewhere, we borrow less, so at least that's the theory. I hope in the end we can, again, borrow less and not put so much burden on both the general fund city and the ed fund and the tax law at the state level. So. Fair to answer.
Here for questions.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Jason. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, and thank you. This is, I think, welcome news. I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, was this anticipated as part of the funding model, and did it just need to be approved? Is that like?
I would say that you don't anticipate or project these funding sources great certainty, so we didn't include it in any modeling.
Okay.
It's sort of icing, if you will. It's money that makes a huge difference to the city's bottom line, basically. So it's great when you can get it, but you don't want to be too optimistic about it.
It was never part of that.
It wasn't.
It was not, nor were some of the COVID inflationary increases that we're facing with this project as well. And so, I'd be remiss to say that, we are having a new financial landscape. We're still doing design work, especially on the eastern two blocks that got added, both the eastern block of Bank and the eastern block of Cherry. So along with that design work, we'll have updated cost estimates, and we'll come to the city council in the next few months to update where we are on the project overall.
Any other questions or comments? Well, it is a, what is our action on this? There are motions in the memo. Oh, sorry. It is the copy again. I'll just keep blaming the copy. It's fine. Everything is fine. If anyone would like to make a motion, it is a three-part motion. So if someone wants to shorthand it with the actions that they can do,
I will move the recommended action on city plan.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion before we vote? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving right along to item 4.2, which is a water resources fiscal year 25 personnel reorganization. Creation of a meter to cash team, part of our water resources team within our public works.
Great, thank you. I'll kick it off by just saying this creation of the meter to cash team really is an important multi-year goal that we've had since in 2017. We had a number of billing errors, some of them quite large, that required significant forensic work on our part and work with our key customers to resolve. We have done that with our existing team, but have noticed the strains of trying to do all this work with our existing team. In addition, we have smart metering technology we want to implement, as BED has already done. It will give us and our customers additional functionality that also needs to be managed. This creation of this team that we're here to talk to tonight is budgeted and was discussed in our 2025 budget presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Megan to talk the details, and I'm here to answer questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Yes, there is a repurposing of one previous position and then one additional position. I think the other piece, other than just making sure that the folks who are doing this detailed level of sort of billing work and the forensics of when a meter dies, exactly what happened, and making sure when a new meter gets put in, that it gets put into our system exactly and perfectly, which is not what happened in the previous years and which resulted in the billing error. And functionally, I'm still trying to get enough time for my next level staff so that they can actually help me with the amount of borrowing that we're doing, with the amount of creativity that we're going to try to employ with portfolio borrowing. It's too big to manage just in my own head. I need a team and the person who oversees this work group, time after time, we just can't get to a place where she actually has enough support that she can then play in my sandbox. And so it's a bit of a sustainability position to add this lower level capacity to hopefully then pull some stuff off, right? You have anything else?
No, pleased to have Tony Barry here, HR
Tony.
department, who's helped us with this proposal, and happy to answer questions.
Great. Tony, do you have anything to add before we go to questions or comments?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tony, for being here. Questions or comments from the board? Councilor Carpenter?
I know we talked about it in last June. I respect Megan's need, but we still have that little deficit that we gotta deal with. And I'm just sort of, questioning adding a person in an environment where they need less people. So I'm just, I don't know, questioning that, I guess, in a sense, and, sort of departmentally, not specifically to this team, but how does that play with whatever else we're gonna have to look at?
I will start off just overseeing the entirety of the DPW budget. This is enterprise funds, which is separate from the DPW general fund. We've been working well with the administration and will likely be coming forward with proposals that reduce FTEs. And that is a very real challenge on the general fund side. I will say on the enterprise side, we had been under-resourced for a very long time, and I am worried about the sustainability of the team to be able to make the large generational investments that we've got in our hopper without having a team behind it to manage that. The piece that I always try to remind folks is we're constantly operating 24/7 while we're also trying to do these big things. And that is something that our department really struggles with. And having been around long enough and lived through the billing errors, and Megan joined the team right as those billing errors were unfolding, is that I got a crash course in the detail of meter to cash operations and saw how fragile and under-resourced we were. Having a couple $1 million billing error with UVM and UVMMC is not something that we can repeat and keep our trust of our customers. So I personally am sold on this. It will not impact the general.
I'm also curious, you just talked about the smart metering or added smart metering, and just curious about that, and so in the long run, is that we have to add a lot of staff to smart metering, how is that all going?
I mean, at this point, I'm not anticipating adding additional staff. The sort of meter to cash, needing more specialized expertise for the meter to cash cycle kind of gets us to this other place. We think additionally, it's going to put us in a better position to launch smart metering, because while Jess, the director, and I, we want to go that direction, we can't figure out how we would functionally roll it out and figure out how to organize who goes first, how do we organize all of the things, as well as setting up all of the systems that need to be set up. But overall, it should be more efficient. We already gained some efficiencies by improving our meter reading technology. It used to take three guys 3 days to read meters, and now we're down to one day with one guy. This will literally just suck up the data from the cloud, if you will. But the biggest thing is that customers will be able to get instant notification, right? We're better than quarterly reads, because you don't have to wait for 3 months to find out that you had a leak and you have a giant bill. We at least tell you every 30 days, oh, you have a big bill. But this would actually give you the ability to recognize on the day, oh, something's using an inordinate amount of water. So implementing smart metering is more about probably our delivery to the customer than necessarily making something more efficient on our side. But that said, we think that these two positions would be sufficient to be able to handle that rollout, which is not going to be a fast rollout. It's going to be incremental and slow, but we want to get on that train, especially as we are having those higher rate increases, so that people have the ability to control
and know what their water bill is and dial it in and set budget alerts, right? And tell their kid or their mother-in-law or whoever, hey, you just use a whole bunch of money and maybe issue an invoice, I don't know.
So are we, this is a full sign off, do we have smart meeting, or are you saying this is to lead you to it?
We have one receiver that's on the top of the UVM tank that we've been doing a pilot with. It's kind of cool. One of the billing errors was with UVM Medical Center.
Yeah.
And instead of just cutting them a check, we actually took that money and repurposed it into doing a number of water supply efficiency things. But one of the things was getting our first receiver at the UVM tower so that we could employ smart metering for just their meters. We have money in the budget this year, and then I was planning for next year to put 2 other receivers that would give us the vast majority of the city. The next step then is the meters themselves. And I will say most of the meters in the city, like all of our infrastructure, is aged and already needs to be replaced. So it's not an additional cost to then go in and replace somebody's meter. We would be trying to roll it out with like, Chapin, your house already has a meter that needs to be replaced. We're gonna replace it and we're gonna put in a smart meter ready meter. The other thing that's important as we actually get on the train of replacing our meters slow down over time. And so it's likely we could actually find some lost revenue by getting our meter stock up to snuff, because we would be putting in meters that are more accurate than what we currently have in our stock. At least that's the premise with most of the meter replacement programs. There's lots more to learn about meters. I learned way too much during that time frame, so.
And why some meters have standing zeros and others have 2 standing zeros is still beyond me, but we have all sorts of old meters that aren't all the same.
It's very exciting to know. Okay. A conversation for another day. Councilor Carpenter, I wanted to just mention on the general fund side of this, your first question. So more will be coming from the clerk treasurer's office and my office in March around the general fund side of things and the structural budget gap that we brought to you in an estimate, very early estimate in January or whenever we were first here and talking about that. And some of the work we've been doing with a program and service inventory, diving more deeply into largely the general fund departments, and figuring out how we were going to close that with a combination of just budgetary changes, but also the Modern Gov initiative. And so we're packaging that all together. I just finished the initial review from my side on the program service inventory, and we're going back to departments with questions and suggestions on where do we right size, meaning potentially cut in some areas. And making sure we also understand where any personnel impacts would be before we bring it to a public session. So March is our target date for understanding that. And also understanding that there are important decisions we need to make, and we just need to make sure we have some good process around it so people might be impacted, have time, re-engage the unions, et cetera, in that work.
But these are enterprise
These are enterprise funds, but just for the sake of the viewers at home, the millions of viewers which you get for Board of Finance, I want to make sure folks understand for the larger budget, the general fund budget in particular, which does have a structural budget gap that we are working on it, and more to come at a future March. So any other questions on the water division item? Is there a motion? And I also invite people to take a shorthand motion if you say take the actions necessary indicated on this. I'm feeling very generous with my conversation.
I would move to recommend that we approve the positions and motions listed on Senate.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Kane. Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, our next item is related to our audit. It's the acceptance and approval of our fiscal year 24 audit by our clerk treasurer's office. Brad?
Yes,
Can we get on this one?
I will kick us off. We also have Alina, our auditor, who is joining us online. I will start by thanking Brad and Ann Barton is here as well, and those two really took the lead for us on the city side for completing the audit. And most people really just hear about it in this meeting or perhaps at city council and don't realize that pretty much every moment from June 30th until now has been spent on the audit. That's a slight exaggeration, but not too much. It's a really big task for the clerk treasurer's office. I also want to let everyone know that instead of the recommended action that's listed here, we will just present for information only tonight and then take any questions you have, and then we'll come back at our next meeting in March for that action to make sure everyone has enough time. And that is in part because not all of the materials were posted on Friday. I apologize for that. This is the first time Brad's going through this, and so we didn't get every supporting document up until today. So it's no problem to wait. And with that, Brad, I will turn it over to you and Alina.
Very much. So in your packet, we presented just a general overview of why we do the audit, what it is, some of the results. Alina Korsak and her team are from our audit firm, Markham, which through the course of our engagement during this audit were acquired by a company, CBiz, which is one of the larger accounting firms in the country. But for the sake of this engagement, they were still considered we are a Markham client until I think this is one of their last engagements. So if there's any confusion on who our auditors are, it's Alina and her team, and they've been doing the service for us for many years. They do a good job. So the what and the why of an audit, we review our municipal financial records on an annual basis. And it is a comprehensive review. All components of the city, including the general fund, the enterprise funds, and the school district are all part of this audit. And it is conducted by a third-party auditor, Alina and her team. And it is both a management tool and a way in which we can communicate how we are doing financially as a city. We post this information on the clerk treasurer's website, and as of this afternoon, all of the relevant information has been updated on that website. So any member of the public can see it. It's often a tool of reference we use to direct citizen questions about any of the city finances, because more than likely what you want to know about is listed in that report. It's also something that we have to do based on Vermont law, and all other towns have to go through an audit similar to this process to maintain sort of public accountability and trust within our financial systems and processes. Any questions on why we do an audit? Okay. Or what of those? No. Okay. So the audit is kind of like getting your report card in a way. It lets you know how you've done, not only financially, but a portion of the audit is also some recommendations for ways in which you can improve upon your processes and internal controls and other things that the auditors are able to identify while they're going through your comprehensive books. And we had in our management letter 3 recommendations. We didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, but we had 3 recommendations. 1, to improve our controls over journal entries and adhere to a formal closing schedule. This is a repeat finding for the city and one that was gaining ground on, but still have some work to do. And really involves making transfers and shifting monies around while you're going through the audit. After 60 to 90 days from the close of your fiscal year. And so in our case, much of those involve putting maybe ARPA funds where they ought to be, or transferring certain enterprise funds that are available back to the general fund, or vice versa, where they ought to go. We missed some of those marks there, and so we have some plans on how we're going to address that. We also had a recommendation to review our ordinance language in comparison with our CBAs. There is a technical point about the discount rate we use to value our actuarially defined employer contribution and other pension contributions. And we have one number that's listed in our city ordinance that says we shall follow it, and then we've agreed to other numbers in our various collective bargaining agreements. We have chosen thus far to follow what we've agreed to in our CBAs. And Haley from the city attorney's office has recommended that we make a minor amendment to our ordinance language to include a clause that says you will follow this discount rate when calculating your pensions, or whatever's listed in the collective bargaining agreements. So you'll be seeing some action to take on that regard shortly.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
This, my curiosity, seems an odd thing to put in an ordinance. So,
I mean, I think that's an open question as well.
I mean, or does it need to be an ordinance? I just, because it's a tool, it's a financial tool. We should have a policy that tells us how we pick a discount rate. But it just seems to not, in my opinion, match what an ordinance, as opposed to a policy that said, here's how you pick a discount rate. So should it be taken out of ordinance?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I can also imagine, scenarios in Burlington's history where at one point somebody thought that was we thought that was a really good idea to put it in
I can
ordinance.
imagine that.
But I tend to agree with you that it probably doesn't need to be as prescriptive in ordinance.
I mean, I assume we have a pension advisor, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that they would recommend something to us,
Yes,
and
and that's what we're following,
Yeah.
and it's just the ordinance is not in alignment with that now, so I think you bring up a good point, rather than continuously
Yeah.
changing the ordinance, do we just take it out?
yeah, I would think
Yes,
we might want to think about something.
I think that's wise.
So you'll be seeing a proposal from either the city attorney's office or the clerk treasurer's office in the short term, recommending a change or a potential removal of that as possible. The last thing was some improvements to our IT policies. Really, it's just one of our financial systems that we use, New World, is a Byzantine labyrinth of security networks in order to allow city employees to do what they need to do within the system. And we need to just put in some forms that verify that the right people, like a department head or somebody, is acknowledging on an annual basis that this employee should have this kind of security, this employee should have this kind of security. And so we'll implement that, and Scott Barker has taken the lead on that. And all things security related to our IT system, and we'll be implementing that right along already. So then we really get into the meat and potatoes of the finances, and I've reprised the audit report out to Board of Finance that you've been familiar with in the past, which does have some maybe different kind of roll-ups into what all the categories mean. So I've tried to spell out some of the unclear ones at the bottom, but in total, our, what it says are some of the things that we already kind of know, which is our revenues are came in below what we budgeted, and that is historically the case for our Burlington revenues, is that we have actual experience below our budget, and the same is true, thankfully, with expenditures. So we were minus 2.4 million below our budgeted revenue amounts, and we were 4 million below our budgeted expenditure amounts. We also have areas that include various transfers in bond premiums and use of our fund balance, which is really our carry forward funds that the mayor and the council assign the use of those fund balance for particular items, and they're really previous years' dollars that are spent in the current year. And you can see the net result there is that we had in our budget 11.4 million from those other sources, and we received 5.1 million. And in our other uses is a similar kind of accounting roll-up that describes what our capital outlay is, our debt service, and our transfers. But really what this all shakes down to is the unassigned fund balance. And what occurs in our unassigned fund balance. Just to remind everybody, we have city policy that states we are to have an unassigned fund balance between 5 and 15% of the year's expenditures. And our target is 10%. And so in FY 23, we had an unassigned fund balance of 6.5 million. We had some increases to that fund balance through activity through the fiscal year, but we also had some decreases based on our activity through the fiscal year, which resulted in a decrease in our fund balance of approximately $350,000. So from 6.5 million to 6.15. And as a percentage basis, that 6.15 million represents 7.2%. We have a slide in the presentation that links to the fund balance policy and shows what our target range is. So we fall within our target range, and this graphic representation on slide 11 shows where we've been and kind of how we're doing currently. So as of FY13, we had a negative fund balance, and the city did good work over the next few years to increase that into a positive income or statement, which is useful when we talk to Moody's, when we do any of our investing. It is a valuable policy, and it is excellent that we are within the range of following that policy. But as you can see, over the last 4 years, there's been a downward trend in our unassigned fund balance. Part of that has to do with our unassigned fund balance is calculated based off our year's expenditures. And as you know from looking at our budgets and working on our budgets year after year, our expenditures are always going up. So we have to increase our fund balance about $500,000 a year just to stay even. And if we wanted to increase it, we'd have to, spend less than we make in an amount greater than 500,000 to get back up to that 10% range. And I did a little scenario for this meeting, just to give you a for instance, which is if we have to keep 500,000, if we have to add $500,000 roughly every year to maintain a level percentage of our fund balance. What would it take to get us from where we are now at 7.1%, 7.2% to our target of 10%? And if we were able to add $1 million annually, we would get to our 10% fiscal year 28. That is, I'm not stating that's a goal or something that we should do in light of many of the budgetary challenges we have, but it's just to give you some context while you're looking through our budgets of what it would mean to increase our fund balance in a significant way and how long it would take. We finish off with some definitions of accounting terms. You'll see sprinkled throughout the annual comprehensive financial report, but also in particular in relation to the fund balance. So you can do those as you would, but they're somewhat self-explanatory. And our final page gives question or a statement of the balances and activity in each of those reporting categories for the fiscal year. So I would open it up to any questions. I'd be happy to try to answer. We have Alina online and Anne here in the room for any sort of technical based questions if you have them, or if not, we'll look forward to presenting you with an action to adopt and approve our 2024 annual audit at the next Board of Finance meeting, should you have enough time to review all this information, because it is a ton of information, and ask relevant questions as they come up.
Brad, questions from the board? Mr. Barlow?
Yes, well, thank you for that, and thank you for the additional time to review the information. There's a lot of started to go through the comprehensive report, so
Yes.
I appreciate that, because I agree with former Councilor Bush, and it is important for us just to review it. So thank you for the extra time. I had a question about one of the recommendations or concerns in the management letter around the first one. It's about the city's continuing to make significant journal entries as a 5 to 7 months after financial period. If you could just add a little color to what sort of things those are. You mentioned potentially moving ARPA monies around as one. Is that?
Yeah, I started to follow, when we received the management letter, I started to pepper Alina with questions about how it is that their firm comes to identify that as a recommendation so that I could understand in more detail. So I think instead of me trying to fumble through it, maybe I'll offer Alina to give an explanation to Councilor Barlow on some of the actions we took that resulted in this recommendation. Oh, okay, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you right now, Alina.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just saying that it's been a successful audit year. We're just so happy that the city was able to hire a finance director, and we were thrilled on how much he was able to accomplish in such a short amount of time, and just really thankful to Anne, who's been really so loyal and dedicated to this process. We couldn't have done it without her. And the first management letter comment, although it's been around for a while, there has been improvement to that. And some of the items you just asked about, the bigger number amounts for journal entries had to deal with capital assets, which is really the very back end. Everything else has to be final before you can work on those. So that's one of the reasons that the big number adjustments were made there. And some of the other items were, as Brad mentioned, transfers. There were some receivables and other liabilities and some other items that came into play. But those were the kinds that just took longer to figure out and make sure that the adjustments were made. But I do want to say that there were improvements this year, and there were less of those adjustments this year.
Yeah,
When you talked about, it was the movement of expenses, moving it from operating to capital or the other way around. You were saying the bulk of those adjustments were around capital, and it was whether they were expensed or capitalized?
Yes, and capital assets is an area where while the city does the journal entries for the enterprise funds, it's really, the information is really provided to us for governmental funds to get that all consolidated and put those capital assets on the books for government-wide financial statements, which are on an accrual basis. So it is one of the last processes that takes place. And there were just some numbers that were identified that it is quite a process. I know city had various softwares over the years, and it's had to go back to Excel because of the transition to a certain one didn't work out. But so a lot of times, if it happens that way, in manual way of doing it can happen because a lot of times, for example, you have a project reports that if you don't identify a certain project and you don't look at it, you might miss the related capital assets. So it just, it all worked out. It just took a while, but it all worked out. And it wasn't so much, on enterprise funds, it is in the city's books, but like I said, in governmental, it's not. So the bigger correction there was really just the financial statement correction and not an actual journal entry. The journal entries, the transfers, and some of the other items, the debt liabilities and receivables, that just resulted with either the original entry wasn't quite made correctly, it just took a while to correct it, or it took a while just to get to that account because the account was involved a lot of processes to get that receivable to where it should be. So I would say that the improvements were definitely made. But the accounts that were affected it was a few steps and therefore caused some of these adjustments to be made late.
yeah, and I think given that a lot of our challenges center around the capital assets, which I think we're showing improvement, but we also were able to hire a new capital assets accountant, or not just capital assets, but a senior accountant who focuses on capital projects and the capital project accounting. And he has a CPA, and he's been here since September, and he's really getting his feet under him. And I think we're going to make some major headway on that regard this year.
So I'm mindful of what time it is. We have to be upstairs around 6 o'clock or so. So are there any other pressing questions on the audit, knowing that we're going to take a vote on this and further review next time? Pressing questions at this point. Time for
Yeah, you can always reach out to me.
keep talking, since we're not going to take action. Thank you. Thank you both of you very much for your walking us through the at least initial overview of our audit. And with that, we'll move on to our next and final deliberative agenda item, item 4.4, which is our fiscal year 25 budget to actuals review through December 31st, 2024. Got you lead as well on this one?
That's right.
Okay, take it away, Tim.
So we are back talking about budget to actuals for fiscal 25. And we don't have a ton of earth-shattering news since our last update, which was reviewing the budget to actuals through October 31st. And these reports account through December 31st, 2024, so halfway through the fiscal year. And our big picture is that both our revenues and expenditures still are trending $4 million below our budget. And our projections show a break even or a little above break even to a modest surplus of about $200,000, which would, all things being equal, like we were talking about with our assigned fund balance, would show a slight decrease in our fund balance percentage. So we took that lens as we were reviewing kind of some recommendations along the way. Looking into the big five revenues, property taxes, our pilots, our fee for services, the local option tax and franchise fees, all are primarily within the range of on budget. Our continual miss from a budget to actual standpoint still is in the gross receipts category. So we had budgeted 7.2 million and our current projections are looking more towards 6.2, 6.3 million that we'll receive in revenue for gross receipts taxes. And we tried to give a similar comparison to the last time we met about what is going on or what does some of the data points show. And we this is a preliminary reporting of clerk treasurer's data related to gross receipts. And you notice the first number that jumps out is our number of submissions is down 20.4%. And we've started to do some legwork to find out exactly why, but I don't have a great answer for you as to exactly why certain categories have decreased in the number of submissions. And you know, we've had some conversations with our business and workforce development team, and we're going to continue to try to pull on this thread to see if we can analyze all the information that we have available and give you some sort of reasons as to what's going on, why is this happening. But at this point in time, I don't, any answer is as good as any other one in terms of data and evidence. Our gross sales are down 10.1% compared to a similar time last year, with majority of that decrease coming from amusements, alcohol, and admissions. But our gross receipts revenue, if you compare FY25 to FY24, we are showing $500,000 ahead of where we were. But that is due to the rooms tax increased by 2% and the meals being up 0.5%. So we have 18.5% growth in our revenues, but that isn't as much as we anticipated. From an expenditure standpoint, things are tracking pretty well in line. The only number, if you look at our large departments, which make up 55% of our general fund budget, that is kind of outside of the range of on budget or close to budget, is DPW, and that's largely a result of a slate of vacancies at the beginning of the fiscal year that I believe since have primarily been filled. The fire and police and parks, which are our other three large departments, are largely spending on budget. In the police department, you'll see that there is about a 14% vacancy rate for sworn officers, but a large portion of that expenditure savings is from overtime and other costs related to safe staffing levels. And my computer crashed me. Can you just go to the last page? Okay.
Computer, figure out how to find the money to get you your computer.
Yeah,
This happens frequently. With that.
I'll figure that out.
Okay.
I gotta find Sam. And really what we're coming down to is probably the next time we get together and talk about budget to actuals, we're gonna have some specific examples of things that we need to do in fiscal 25 to potentially reduce our expenditure budget One, in order to give ourselves a little bit more insurance off the slight surplus that we're projecting right now. And also to try to inch our way ahead of the game a little bit in terms of our unassigned fund balance. But we have some ideas in the works, but no specific proposals to offer. But those will be coming shortly. Those also lead directly into FY26 budget conversations, so they're all kind of the same.
Questions or comments from the board in our last 5 minutes we have? Councilor Carpenter?
Just on the roll-up you have on pilot fee for service and development fees.
Yeah.
Which seem disparate, and that this might be interesting to unroll them only because they're not like revenue sources. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think we lumped them together because they're all sort of agreement based,
Yeah.
but they are very much different in terms of what. So we can do them.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, Brad, for continuing to give us the budget, the actual reports on a consistent basis. And as I mentioned from an earlier agenda item, it does all roll into fiscal year 26 in many ways. We will be back in March for a bigger picture about how we are putting solutions on the table, not only to finish this year in a strong place, but prepare for fiscal year 26. I knew I was talking, filibustering for you, Councilor Carpenter. Yes,
No,
okay.
so this is general fund, right?
Yes,
Um,
correct.
Do we do a budget to actual on non-general fund, like external sources, federal sources? And it shows up in our audit, I'm sure, but
Of all the other funds, we do not right now.
We
To
reporting to the board.
produce to the
Yeah,
board. Yeah, it's not like
yes.
we're never looking at them, but we are not producing
I
one
just,
currently for you. Yes.
particularly in this federal environment, this
Mm-hmm.
might be useful to track. Cause
Yes.
I am concerned we're gonna lose revenue that we rely on, and just, where are we losing revenue if we're losing it? Both federal and state, and a big chunk for many departments, program income is not general fund, so.
Well, and there are also, just to be clear, there are grants that go to general fund departments as well on the federal level,
Okay.
and as many people know, even if the grant officially comes from the state and the check says state of Vermont, sometimes that is actually federal funds passing through the state. We've internally started to track this a little bit, and I was gonna say upstairs in my mayor's comment, just a brief update of how we're tracking the change in administration in Washington DC, the impact it's having so far out of the gate in terms of our finances, but just briefly, we have 2 grants that have been frozen so far. One for Burlington Electric Department, the other being for Business Workforce and Development. Frozen emphasis, we don't know if that money is disappearing or not, so I don't wanna raise any major alarm at this point. However, as a result of that, we have been starting to track internally our grant sourcing so that we can have a better picture of it. And certainly, at some point in March, we can bring that once we have a finer understanding of where those pieces are, what is the risk level. I've asked department heads a couple months ago to start in anticipation of the change in the president. What do we need to be tracking? I think what we've learned in the fortunate first few weeks of this administration is that even what we assumed before January 20th, there's even more wildly unpredictable things happening, and so we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence.
Well, I think just generally speaking certainly for council, but the public, to get a sense of the balance between general fund, basically earned revenue, and
Yes.
these other chunks of money that we run the city on. And I think people don't understand that easily, and so we may be going into 26 thinking of ways to present that to people that it will be important. Particularly if it's on the downside, which is, we're losing these sources, so that's gonna put pressure over here. But just in generally speaking, I think the flip of it is, we do a lot of good stuff, because we're good at pursuing grants and all that good stuff, and people don't quite understand that.
I think that's really important for not only transparency, but understanding there are things outside the control of city government that might be changing revenue sources. And
Yes.
there are only a limited number of things within city government's purview that we have ability to impact in terms of revenue. And while we're diligently building fiscal year 26, this is a few portions of our revenue sources around which is changing underneath us. And as we do our due diligence, we have to be very careful about how we address other revenue sources, meaning local taxes and whatnot as we move forward. So, yeah, duly noted, we will share the news. Okay. So seeing no other further action for the Board of Finance, I'm gonna go ahead and close Board of Finance and adjourn the meeting at 6:01 p.m. Thank you all very much.